Welcome to the Home Building Hub, your essential podcast guide to building your new home. Hosted by industry experts Colin Bischoff and Darren Brennan, this conversational podcast will help better educate you about all things new home building so you can avoid costly mistakes and enjoy your building experience to the fullest, no matter which home builder you choose.
Hey there, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Home Building Hub. It's Colin here with co-host Darren Brennan, as always. Today we've got a special guest. Name is Will Anderson from a company called RPM Real Estate. RPM essentially sell land developments across the eastern seaboard. Essentially, they're currently representing around 30 estates across those states there. So I guess for Will, to introduce Will, to say hello, Will is a builder relationship manager essentially at RPM, and he's been there for about 3 years, just under 3 years. And what he does is he works on research with the research team to deliver, I guess, up-to-date information for builders and for the broader industry as a whole, talking about land sales rates, movement in pricing, things like lot size trends and lot widths, population, immigration, which we'll touch on today as well, and just general trends in I guess, house sizes, household incomes, borrowing capacity, all that sort of stuff. So it's really great, valuable insight and information. We wanted to share that with you today. As a home buyer listening, you're working out whether I should or shouldn't. This should give you some great insights coming from Will. So good morning, Darren. How are you today, mate?
G'day, Cole. Going very well, mate. Thank you. And as usual, hoping that my internet's going to do the job today. We'll give it our best shot, I know. We're just chatting about, some of the complexities of running the podcast and how that fits in. So Colin in the background does some pretty amazing work to make me look more like I'm actually there rather than 3 seconds before or 3 seconds after. So well done, Cole. Appreciate that. Hey, jump in with the fee for the podcast. If you do get a chance, please share the podcast with others. We'd really appreciate that. The uplift of late's been fantastic, and we're certainly seeing that growth there, and we do really appreciate that. We'd love it if you left us a 5-star review, and again, that gives us a better chance to share the knowledge with others. We do have a disclaimer, so whilst the podcast is all about providing value to you, this podcast should not be considered as legal or financial advice. It contains general information only, and you should seek independent professional advice before using any of this information on yourself. So, yeah, buggered that up a little bit, but that's all right. That's how it rolls. And, mate, well, Saturday morning, as always, we often record this sort of welcome. Mate, thanks so much for joining us early on at the time, but so sorry to get you out of bed early, mate, but pretty excited to have you on board, and I think today will be an amazing episode to sort of provide that update on where the market's at for our listeners.
No, thank you so much for having me. I've got an excellent opportunity with RPM and within my role to be able to speak to our market and be able to educate people and let them know what's going on, and I try and use this platform as a place to create some positivity, and I'm excited to share that with you all today, and hopefully people can get some really good takeaways out of it.
Fantastic, mate. Hey, I guess let's jump straight into it, mate. Where do you see the data pointing right now? I mean, obviously buying property is generally a long game, and a lot of people talk about property doubling every 10 years, but what's the numbers look like at this point in time? We've seen a bit of a dip in the market. You think that still that recovery, which is certainly looks like it's underway, and then that ability to, sort of double those numbers in 10 years is still on the cards? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, that's absolutely something that's still going to hold true. That pattern of doubling every 10 years, that's something that's held true for about the last 100 years. It's gone through a lot of cycles of ups and downs. And that's important to recognize that it does still double even with the downs. And what we often see is periods like we've seen now, where in the space of 1 year, people might have a 20% growth in their property. And then in the following year, they actually experience, say, a 10% decline in the value of their property. However, averaged out over the 2 years, they're still 10% up on what they were before. So whilst yes, we've experienced that bit of that downfall at the moment in property values, we've seen an exceptional rise in property values still, and that value is still holding true in the market. We always talk about, people often asking when should I buy, what should I do, and it's all about time in the market, absolutely. And the longer you are in the market, the better chance you're going to have. That's why, often when I talk to, my parents or someone like that, and, you always have that conversation about, when I was your age and so forth. But, they bought their homes for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and now they're worth $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 because they've owned them for 25 years and the value has just increased exponentially. And that's something that will continue to be true.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we definitely agree on that. And I think you might be the third person that's jumped on our podcast that said time in the market is the way to be. And it's definitely the case. And, no doubt that, property is such a great way of growing wealth. It doesn't happen overnight. If you want to make real instant wealth, they say go to the casino, but that's called gambling. And property investing, it can be a gamble, but generally it's a pretty safe bet. So yeah, it's good.
And that goes for whether it's new or established, to be honest, so that's probably a general understanding. So I guess it's important probably to highlight a little bit too with RPM where you work, Will. I mean, they're no small business. They've been around a long time and they're pretty substantial player in our market. And just for people to understand what they do, essentially a developer would own the land, and then RPM would be engaged to help them sell that land. Okay, so just so people understand what role RPM play, and specifically for Will, he then gets the luxury of having all that data and all that information coming out of the 30 odd estates that are on the books at the moment, and the very many more than that historically that have now closed out or all been sold through. So that's where this data is coming from, the understanding of live current market information. So good stuff. I was going to maybe move into. Sorry, you go, Will.
I was just going to say, RPM's been, we're coming up to nearly our 30th year in business. That's next year, which is really exciting. We currently represent about anywhere from 25 to 30% of the market in Victoria. So just to give a bit of context, and when we're talking about what's happening out there in the marketplace, we have a really, really good sample size to speak to that's accurate and representative of the true data. And yeah, as you said, exactly, we're representing the developer. We're giving them recommendations on how lots should be cut up, sales strategies, what direction the market is moving in. We've got an additional nearly 15 projects to launch in the new year. So whilst the market is experiencing a lull at the moment, we are expecting a really, really big surge in the new year.
Yeah, it's good. The next question, I guess, for you, Will, is a clear bit of clarity for people is around immigration. So, I mean, we understand immigration does drive the economy, and I guess, is there anything you could share on how does it look? What do the numbers look like? That pent up demand moving forward. Is there anything you could share on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually probably one of the favorite things for me to talk about because there's just so many people coming through, and the way I like to talk about it is just that big wave. I hope that we're all ready to get our surfboards out and ride that wave because there's so many people coming that are going to need homes, and that's going to have a few different impacts, I guess, on the marketplace. I guess the first thing being that last year, the government was initially forecasting about 80,000 international migrants to come into Victoria. The actual number ended up being about 130,000. So it goes to show that we have rebounded really, really strongly following COVID. Obviously, a period of we had 0 international migrants for a long time. People have been very quick to come back. Current forecasts are showing that over the next 3 years, about another 100,000 migrants per year. And then that final year, they're forecasting about 80,000 migrants. So over the next 5 years, including the last financial year, because that's when these numbers were last done by the government, It's an average of 100,000 migrants per year for the next 5 years. So huge amount of people. And if we take a conservative estimate of 3 people per household, that's nearly 30 to 40,000 homes that these people will require just for somewhere to live. Now, of course, that's going to be split up between rentals and apartments and infill and greenfield sites, but it goes to show that there's a continuing building up of demand underneath, and there's a lot of people just from a migration perspective, let alone the people who are already here, that are going to be placing demand on new homes.
I think the affordability piece in Victoria certainly drives that. If you're comparing buying in Sydney, the two biggest migrant, cities for people to move to is Sydney and Melbourne, and Melbourne's definitely getting the biggest share of that. But if you look at that average house value and the opportunity for employment, the proximity to the city, etc., that people can be buying, and I think it really favours that a lot. So, you see in Sydney, if you're out near Parramatta, you're sort of 50 or 60 k's out of the city. You're getting a long way out of the city in the western suburbs, and you'll find, again, west and north is the predominant, not dissimilar to Melbourne, that west through north being the predominant, growth corridors. But you're so much closer. You can be out as far as Melton, and be 30 k's from the city, So Melbourne, it's got a big urban sprawl, but because of the way it's much flatter and doesn't have all these hills in the way and stuff, it allows people to be a lot closer. You can build up a bit more density, and then the price is significantly cheaper for people to be able to actually buy here, and you see a lot of people buying 2 house and land for the price of 1 in Sydney almost, in Victoria. So it's, really, really positive in that respect. So I think that does help drive those numbers more favourably to Victoria, which is great.
Exactly to that. We are seeing those interstate migrants return as well. Over the COVID period, that we did experience a negative population, in that we saw quite a few people leave Victoria, especially for the sunny state. People going up to Queensland. We know that COVID advanced a lot of people's plans. They knew they wanted to retire there. And it's often where Victorians do go to retire. So when COVID came along, they saw that as an opportunity of, let's just do it now. Let's just go. So we lost a few people. However, that interstate migration is coming back, and we are seeing more of that. And especially because people, once they're ready to buy, they look at those Sydney prices and go, this is ridiculous. I can't do this. So they're coming to Melbourne and realizing they can get something of a really, really high quality at a much better value than they can in Sydney. And we know, even from an investor perspective, we deal with a lot of customers who are based in Sydney and they are buying properties in Melbourne because it's just not viable. Like you just said, Daz, they're buying maybe 2 properties for the price of what they could for 1 in Sydney, and that 1 property might not even be habitable yet. They have to spend, thousands and thousands of dollars more just to get it to a good condition.
Yeah. No, that's good insights. You got the next question there, Daz?
I was just going to say, what's the long-term population look like, Will? I mean, obviously migration's coming in, but so you got any numbers on what the overall growth looks like maybe over the next 10 years?
I can definitely tell you that Victoria will actually outstrip the national average in terms of population growth. So what Victoria is expecting over the next 10 years, they're expecting about, I want to say 1.62% population growth versus the national average, which is about 1.3 from memory. So Victoria is continually proving to be a place people want to be. I think one of the things that point to this is the most livable cities list. So Melbourne recently was awarded 3rd on the world's most livable cities list, coming from 11th. So we took a really, really big hit over COVID, being especially the most locked down city in the world. That's obviously going to place quite a really big strain on people wanting to be here and the livability of a city. But as we've opened up again, it goes to show that people are more than happy to continue coming into Melbourne and coming into Victoria. And that population is going to continue to boom. Between our international migrants, our interstate migration, and our just natural population growth of the people that are already here, there's just a continuing swell of buyers that are here and will continue to grow and feed that demand for new homes.
Yeah. So I'm a first home buyer investor listening now, and it might be that they're local or not, really, in terms of the investor. What are we seeing? Are people more interested in? Because we see the growth in regional, and that includes in Geelong, Ballarat, the Bendigos, and even up through the northern regional areas as well. But are there going to be, in your view, or based on the data you've got, where do I start looking? Is it given, we can now do a lot of remote work, or, in your case, Daz, I mean, you do a lot of work in Melbourne as well, but you live in Ballarat, so you can get away with working from home here and there or from the local display, but some people are working from home 2, 3, 4 days a week. Has that changed the way it looks now, Will? So when people are thinking about this, okay, Melbourne's a good area, but where do I begin? Have you got anything you can share on that?
COVID definitely changed the way a lot of people approach their purchasing decision. A lot of people previously, pre-COVID, would look at, well, my office is in Essendon, so I want to be within a 20 to 30 kilometre range of that. I've got to be in that office 5 days a week. I don't want to be commuting too far. Whereas now, people go, yep, my office, yes, it's in Essendon, but I work from home 2 to 3 days a week. I can put up with perhaps that longer drive on those couple of days that I am coming in, if it means that I can have a greater lifestyle in a better home, maybe a bit further out. So that's one of the reasons we saw such a rise in more regional areas during that COVID boom, especially in Geelong and Ballarat and down in the southeast, as people realised they could get a bigger home, bigger lot of land, have greater lifestyle opportunities. And yeah, look, their commute's going to be longer, but they're happy to do it because they're coming home to something much bigger and nicer, as opposed to, settling for something smaller and not ideal, not suited to their circumstances, because, they've got more opportunities now. And that's remained true. Whilst, yes, we're out of COVID now, I think those work from home and those flexible working arrangements are very, very much here to stay. We're seeing many businesses continue to adopt that. We're seeing overseas more, the 4-day working week is starting to come into effect. Will that come into effect in Australia? We don't know, but people are changing their mindset about how they live and work, and that's absolutely affecting where they buy.
Do you know, it's interesting. I think we had another guest who from another developer, so it's Rory from Villawood Properties, and he was talking about the government's push to push inner, and go back to, building out infrastructure for inner suburbs around that sort of first suburb ring around the cities, or second or third out, as opposed to building up the regional and whatnot. So it's interesting to hear your data back up exactly what he was saying, is that people want to move out, people want to live in a community, people want to live in an area where, there's a clubhouse or, a local swimming pool, and it's moving back to that local mentality, because you've got, as you said, bigger home, you've got the bigger space in the yard, etc. It's interesting because we have the luxury of talking to so many different people through this podcast that some of those things, Daz, we're starting to see those line up. As different developers and representation or representatives of developers in RPM's case. Like it's quite interesting. Will, thanks for that insight. I think.
Cole, I was going to say, even in regional, it's really interesting. I just saw the Ballarat Council's just put out this big document, and they're wanting to go 50-50 in terms of they want to see people building in town, in the established part of town, infill sites, first building in greenfield sites. And again, mate, I would be 5 kilometres tops from the centre of town, and within less than a kilometre from my house is paddocks, and yet they want us to move towards the 5 kilometres. It's kind of crazy. Like, the paddocks are cheap, in town's expensive. Build on the paddocks. Like, it's just makes no sense. So again, I know that's a bit of a political stand on that, but I think the government's lost the plot at the moment, at all levels, that they're all thinking the same. Oh, the cost, and I think it's it does push a lot back to cost of infrastructure and government having to back that infrastructure. And I actually think our government's, it's pretty clear they've got huge debts, and they're trying to look at ways and means that they don't have to deliver further infrastructure, get people closer to existing train lines, existing freeways. They don't have to build them, and head down that path. But that's not necessarily helping that consumer who actually can't afford it. Like in the end, it's cheap to build in a paddock than what it is to build around established places and try and, and then the cost associated with that land, to purchase, etc. So, yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I think, apartment lifestyle may become more and more of what's pushed, or medium density townhouse style living versus having a backyard. It's very interesting to watch how that plays out over the next few years. And obviously the government's 70-30 rule that they've just tried to push out, which used to be 30-70, so the other way around. And I know the developers certainly aren't happy, Will, and it's not great for greenfield developments. But anyway,
what is the 70-30 rule, just for people who don't understand that?
Yeah, so essentially the government's saying that they want to see 70% of all new dwellings, be that standalone homes, townhouses, apartments, built in the inner suburbs, like you're talking, Cole. So they're not wanting to encourage the outer ring developments, the normal land estate developments as much. And so traditionally we've been about 70% of new dwellings are built in new land estates and 30% are built in infill areas. They're wanting to reverse that completely. So have 70% in infill. So that'll be knockdown rebuilds, knock down our old house, put three units on it, for example, or dual occupancy or high rise around, those key infrastructure areas. So, clearly in Victoria, the government spent a lot of money on railway upgrades, level crossing upgrades, train station upgrades. They want to see more housing closer to those, but that comes at a significant cost or a significant reduction in the size of the home to offset that cost, because not many people can afford a couple of $1 million house, whereas they might be able to afford a $500,000 or $600,000 apartment. So
so with I guess political barriers, what about, Will, if you could help share us a little bit more on for buyers, what are the current market barriers that they have to face when looking for a block of land right now?
I think the biggest block for people, or the barrier, I should say, for people getting into the market is, of course, borrowing capacity. Right now, we've seen 12 rate rises in the market, which have had a really, really big impact on what people can afford. We know, their borrowing power has shifted so significantly and in relatively a very short period of time. So if we took a household income, this might be a two-person household, of $100,000 between them, given the cash rate in April of 2020, they, and their debt to income ratio and their kind of average spending habits, they had a borrowing power of approximately $735,000. That's going to get you a lot of options. You can buy pretty much wherever you want with that kind of money. However, that same household today, their borrowing capacity is closer to the $550,000 mark. So we've gone from over 700,000 to in the middle, those 550 mark. That's really going to have a huge impact on how much they can afford, the size of their lot, the size of their home, what areas are going to be more suited to them. Previously, they might have been open to looking at, I guess, more premium areas, more premium estates, a double-story home of higher spec, whereas now they're having to really reassess that. And instead of before, they could have potentially afforded a 400 or 448 square meter lot with a nice, beautiful 30 to 40 square home. Now they're looking at perhaps a 350 square meter lot, even smaller, 313, 263, and a single-story home. So it's had a really big impact on what they can afford. And that's the big barrier for people, is the uncertainty. They don't know, can I afford tomorrow what I can afford today?
Yeah. And that pushes them out further too, because 550, I mean, I know Melbourne Metro, 550 is going to get you nothing, really. Be pretty tight to get something in there. Maybe a small home on a really small block, perhaps, which is, again, in direct conflict with what the government, with the 70-30 flipping the other way. If you can only afford 550, 650, then you can't go further in. You've got to go further out. So I think we need to really help accommodate that. It'll be interesting to stand back and watch this, Daz, as it goes through. But
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one bit of advice I'd give people in that space though is really talk to your broker, because like even really recently there's been a few changes in the banking lending policies, and some of the non-bank lenders are also starting to really get a bit aggressive around the buffer rates that they're putting in there. So I'm even hearing some are not even applying a buffer. So, if you're not sure, reach out to your mortgage broker. And a lot of people go, I'll just go direct to the bank. My advice is get a broker, like simply because they're going to have a whole range of different products to be able to suit your needs. And the difference between one bank and another may be $100,000 in borrowing capacity. So, like it's really worth doing that. Talk to your broker, find out more. If you don't have a great broker, reach out to us on the Home Building Hub, and we can certainly point you in the direction of a couple of the guys that we know pretty well that are right across that space, and we can help you out there. So,
hey, on that, the barriers. So borrowing capacity will obviously, the biggest one. Borrowing capacity is one thing they got to factor in and consider. When they go to land estates through RPM, do you find there's some common, some other barriers or some other objections as to why they're not purchasing today and maybe waiting till tomorrow? And maybe elaborate a bit on that for us, if you've got any insights there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's probably two big ones that come up. One of them being, I'm going to wait until it's cheaper. And the second one being around builders and who can build my home. So with the first one, I'm going to wait until it's cheaper. We do see in the established market a lot more fluctuation in price. However, the same doesn't ring true for the new builds and new homes. And it doesn't work the same. With an established home, that cost can change greatly because it's already there, it exists. However, with a new build, even though the market might have changed, it's still, if it costs you $100 to make this thing, even if the market shifts, it still costs you $100 to make it. So the pricing for new homes isn't going to change the same way in that established housing might change. So people often said to me, and I've spent, during my time in sales, I was selling around the peak of the market, so not the peak, the lead up to the peak. So it was the build up, really, really good time for people to buy. Prices were super, super cheap compared to today. And I had someone say to me, no, Will, I'm just going to wait. I think it's going to get cheaper. And since then, we've probably seen $100,000 in price growth since that point. And I said at the time, I was like, I tried to explain to them, it's just not going to get cheaper. If you have an opportunity to get in today, you need to take advantage of that opportunity. And for that customer, I really hope that they did buy after speaking to me. They didn't buy from me. I hope they bought from someone, because what they would have bought if they're looking now still for something to buy, it'd be a very, very different conversation. So don't get caught up, and my advice to people, don't get caught up in I'm waiting for it to get cheaper. I think you're going to be waiting a really, really long time for that to happen. If you can have an opportunity to get in, you need to take advantage.
I see in 2011, Point Cook dropped considerably, about 100K. A lot of people trying to time the market, weren't sure if they should buy. Those people that bought in Point Cook have doubled their money, So they may not have bought right at the bottom of the market, but even if they bought halfway down the slide, they've doubled their money anyway. So, like, again, being the long game, it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. The longer you're in there, the more you profit from. And some of those estates at the bottom of Point Cook Road there were, dropped 100K in price, but we're not seeing that this time around. And I don't think it's going to, I must say, I did think that we might see a bit more of a shift in the land price, and it just hasn't happened. And I don't think it is anymore. And looking at where the market's at, I think it's probably turned the other way now. And I think the bottom, if we're not at the bottom, and I think we already are, then I can feel it with my toes. You know what I mean? Like we're in the water, and you're at the sand, and you can scrape it with your toes now. It's right there. So things are certainly looking more positive in that respect. Sorry, Matt, and you were going to touch on with the builders.
Yeah, so with the builders as well, that's a big question, and there's no hiding from the fact that unfortunately we have seen a lot of builders not survive this market. We've seen a lot of builders through the home builder grant period surge so much activity in the market, and many builders just weren't prepared for the flow-on effects of that. And it was something that would have been very, very difficult to be prepared for. It was really hard to understand and see what was going to happen, because so many people came into the market. The government was going to give you $25,000. Many people I know weren't even going to buy. They had no intentions. And then this grant was announced and they went, oh, of course, why wouldn't I? Let's do it. So many people have been pushed into the market. Builders, of course, have taken advantage of that. They've signed up new customers. But the flow-on effects that we've seen, and then with other international activities like conflict overseas, it's placed a lot of pressure on supply, which of course always increases prices. And then with no migration anymore and things like that, we've seen a really big shortage of trades, which of course once again has increased the cost. So for many builders, pre-COVID, it might have cost them say $250,000 to build a 4-bedroom home. Now that same home might cost them $350,000. And that's not even with any profit in there. That's just to literally build the home. And that it's just understanding for people, that's how severe the cost increases have been on a build front. And for many builders who signed up a lot of jobs during this time, it's come time to actually build the homes. The lands have titled, they're ready to go. Those builders have been losing money on those jobs, and that's the reason they unfortunately haven't survived. And it's been a really big struggle, and it's always a sad thing for our industry when a builder doesn't survive. And one of the flow-on effects has been confidence for people. They don't know who's going to be here tomorrow. We've seen, unfortunately, the likes of Harmac has gone into voluntary administration recently. Porter Davis went into liquidation. Bentley Homes, once again, 8 Homes went through a really, really rough period of voluntary administration. They've fortunately come out the other side of that now, and they're building momentum again, which is really, really positive, and I think injects some great messaging into the market, and especially being great Aussie brand surviving through that. I think they're very much that image of that kind of Aussie battler getting through, and which is something which is exciting. So a lot of people are coming in. I don't know what I can do. Are they going to be here tomorrow? At RPM, we have a lot of honest and a lot of very frank chats with our builder partners, because people ask us, who should I build with? And we need to be able to give them a confident answer. So we always would encourage people, if you're having concerns, have a chat with your consultant, whoever that may be. They're going to have a really good, finger on the pulse on who's performing out there, who's a really good option, and we can speak to, because we know we've seen the numbers, we understand what kind of position many businesses are in, and we can give people that confidence. Additionally, with more and more titled stock being out there in the market now, you don't have to ask that question anymore of, are they going to be here in 12 months? Your land is titled now. They can start relatively quickly. Every builder is going to be different, and when they can start, a lot of things feeding into that, of course, with how long it takes to prepare a contract and get trades organized and get your building permit and so forth. But that question of will they be here in 12 months is definitely eroding now, because your land's titled. It's ready to go.
Titled meaning it's ready to build on, for those who are not sure of what that term means, but titled is ready to go. So you can push forward to build contract and go through to the permit stage, and usually they can take upwards around the 3-month mark, I suppose, once your land contract's signed and your quote's done through a builder, to get their contract, the energy rating, the engineering, and the building permit done, and off they go. They're on site not long after. So titled land, very appealing at the moment. I definitely can confirm that. What about you, Daz? Same thing, no doubt.
Absolutely, and I think just from a builder's confidence point of view, the further we trade through this, a lot of the builds that weren't making money were builds from 2021 and 2022. A lot of the stuff that's coming through from this year, 2023, is on today's pricing and certainly profitable for the builder. And, there's no excuses for a builder wanting to be profitable. If you want your builder to be not profitable, then you're mad because they'll probably go broke, right? And we don't want that. So you want your builder to be profitable. We want to see them trade through that. Most builders are getting through that work now, so there's not a lot of 2021 work left. There might be a little bit of the 2022 work, but again, a lot of the stuff sold in 2022 was on the titled land or on the land that was near titling. So again, pricing had come up a fair bit, certainly in the second half of 2022. So it is more likely that your builder's going to be making a little bit of money, and you want them to. Yes, you don't want to make oodles and oodles out of you. We're all human. We want to pay as little as we can, but we want to make sure that they are there at the end of that journey. And that's certainly, heading more and more in the right direction. So, I think time will certainly clear up the havoc that we've had behind us and start to see builders, profitably building homes and doing that to the best of their ability and seeing customers, again, more and more moving into their brand new home. And I think that's the real positive, is that that mess behind us is getting less and less, which is great. So, yeah, it's certainly looking rosier every day. Another day forward, we gain 3 almost at the moment, which is good. And the titled land does really help. It helps people control their cash flow, and that's one of the biggest issues for the building industry is cash flow. So being on titled land, they're not waiting. They can get through, get on site, build that home quite quickly and efficiently. And we're seeing some of that. I know, Cole, we were talking a little bit about that. We're certainly seeing within our business, some of the build time frames are fantastic now. Getting a single story home built in, 4 to 5 months in some occasions, and some doubles, in sort of 6 months, which is back to pre-COVID times. And that's the real key. When we get to those sort of numbers as volume builders, then we're in a really positive position. And that's what it's all about. So, and you get your house quicker, so, which is nice. I know we've somewhat covered it, but, I looked at some stats during the week, and Sydney prices had certainly fallen significantly, more than Melbourne had, and Melbourne prices have certainly fallen, but Sydney's recovered really quickly. And if you look at the movement back up, they've come back up about 6.5%. So they dropped nearly 9 to 10%. And they're already back up 6.5%. Melbourne dropped about 6% and is up about 0.4 in the data that I saw. People talk about the bottom of the market, and everyone wants to find the bottom, etc. And it's one of those ones that's really hard to advise on often. But how are you seeing that? I mean, does the same apply to the land market? Do you think we're at the bottom of the market from a pricing point of view in the land market? And if that's the case, then I'd be saying now's the time to be really looking to buy, because if you're trying to get it right, you miss it by a month or two and prices have already jumped on you. So where are you seeing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So people are always talking about when's the bottom, that's the best moment. And you don't ever really know where the bottom was until after. You can never truly say this is the absolute bottom. You're only going to know that once you look back on it. But we feel confident in saying now that we are in that bottom of the market. Are we going to see maybe a little ups and downs in that bottom? Yes, absolutely. But we feel confident that this is that kind of bottom of the trough for us. And I always tell people, like we were saying earlier, time in the market, not timing the market. But if you're looking for a time in the market, this is certainly the time to do it. What we see in terms of the trends in the land pricing is we go through periods of price growth. So that's when it goes up, and we've gone through that period. And then we go through a period of what we call price stagnation, where that price stays relatively flat. So over the past 2 years in land price, we have seen that absolutely come into effect, where we've seen that price escalate quite significantly. So if I go back to June of 2021, the median lot price was $316,000. Fast forward a year to June of 2022, The median lot price is now 384,000. And then fast forward again to June of this year, that lot price has stayed almost the same at 385,000. So that's our growth and then our stagnation period. However, what you don't see on paper anyway during that stagnation period is the sales, the promos, the extra incentives that are going on in the marketplace. So during the growth period, there's no sales. There's no rebates. There's no extra incentives. There's none of that really happening. There's no ability to negotiate. Whereas when we go through a stagnation period, that's when we start to see the big red sales sticker, $20,000 rebate, this discounted. Some projects I see they'll cover mortgage payments. They'll pay your stamp duty. They're doing all these really, really big things. So the sticker price is staying the same, but there's a lot of extra added benefits around that. And the way I like to think of it is, if you went to the supermarket, your box of cereal is still, $8, but now when you get to the counter, they're going, oh, would you like, we'll give you milk for free as well. Oh, I'll also give you a spoon for free and the bowl, and then I'll wash it for you after. So there's so much more for people to get now. And once we start to enter that growth phase again, all of those extra rebates and incentives, they're going to go away really, really quickly. So now is absolutely an opportunity for people to come in, take advantage of a great deal, or perhaps even build their own deal and put an offer forward and create an opportunity that will work for them.
I reckon my daughter would take you up on that offer, especially the cleaning up the bowl after it's done. She's not real good at that.
I was thinking the same.
So the opportunities are clear, and there's title land out there. Borrowing capacity. So go to a broker, get that information, work out what you can get to. Go to a land office, get to a builder consultant, start working out what's available within the borrowing capacity you've got, whether it's further out, whether it's closer in, whether it's a bigger home or a smaller home, and level of inclusions. You need to be doing that. Those opportunities are in front of you today. So what I was going to ask you, Will, just on that, and sort of secondary to that, for those who are not ready today, who are not understanding what we're trying to say or not agreeing with it, which is totally their call, how does land look moving forward? We've shared in our building side of life that the NCC changes are coming, livable housing, 7-star energy rating, all electric. That stuff is going to impact designs and pricing significantly. We're talking about a matter of months away. What about land? How are the land sizes going to change, or how's land look in 6 months or 12 plus months?
That's a great question, Colin. And the data absolutely shows that land is continuing to shift and change. We're going from, if I go back 7 years ago, about 30% of all land that was sold was either a 448, 512 square meters or bigger. So that's why often when I speak to, my parents, they go, oh, land, it's not the same. They don't do it the same anymore. And they're right. It absolutely is right. Whereas today, your 448 square meters, your 512 square meters, those lots account for only about 15% of the market. So they've gone from 30% down to 15% in the space of 7 years. And the reason for that...
Sorry to cut you off there, Will. 448, guys, for anyone who's not sure, that is usually representative of 14 metre frontage by 32 deep block. And then the 512s, they're actually 16 metres across the front by 32 deep. They used to be the common ones back in the day. Sorry, continue on.
No, yeah, absolutely. So once upon a time, very, very common. Go back even further, it was bigger than that. I live in an older suburb. I'm on an acre block. Everyone on my street is on an acre block. You're measuring 40 by 100 meters. You're just not going to see something like that anymore for a lot of different reasons. And one of the big ones is definitely being affordability. There are plenty of people that might love an acre block, but it's, the cost of buying the land and then building a home, and then as well for a lot of people maintaining a property like that, it's certainly way too big for me and my lifestyle, and doesn't work for me. So it's just not attainable for many people anymore. So we're seeing that shift down, and where we're seeing the growth is in the sale of lots that are either townhouses, the sub 300 square meters. So those are classified as just small lot housing code lots. For those that don't know, you on these kind of lots, you can use a greater area of the land. You can use, in some cases, up to 90% of the land. And you can get a really, really great outcome on these lots. And then as well in the 300 to 350 square meter lots. So we've lost a lot in that really upper portion, but we've seen that growth in the smaller lots as people shift towards our smaller housing code, as affordability. Like we said before, we've gone from a household that might be able to afford $700,000 to $550,000. That's drastically going to change what they're going to be moving into. And then another component is density requirements. We might love to have a project full of 448 square meter lots, 512 square meter lots, because they do look beautiful and they present really, really well. But we have a lot of people we need to get in. Like I was saying earlier, with our migrants, 30 to 40,000 new dwellings each year just for these migrants. They need to live somewhere. And if we continue to cut up really, really big lots, it's not going to work. We're going to end up out in the middle of nowhere really, really quickly. So those lots need to get smaller in order to accommodate for the density of the people that are moving in.
There seems to be a fair bit of titled land around the market right now, popping up on price lists. What are you sort of seeing numbers-wise across, Vic and even interstate, if you've got some numbers on that? How's that sort of stacking?
We absolutely are seeing a swell of titled land at the moment. I was talking with our research team very recently, and on price lists today across Greater Melbourne, so that's the southeast, the north, the west, and down in Geelong as well. There's nearly 900 titled lots already on the market today. So there's an opportunity for people to buy something that's titled right now. Additionally, on those price lists already across every estate, and RPM collects data from every single project in Victoria, and we are beginning to expand into interstate. Unfortunately, I can't speak too closely and too well on what's happening in, say, our Queensland or our New South Wales markets. But in Victoria, on price list today, there's about 1,500 lots that are due to be titled before the end of this year. So that's over 2,000 lots or pretty much out there today that are either titled or going to be titled in the next couple of months. So it presents a really, really good opportunity for people to get into a home today. We did come from a period quite recently where title dates were pushing. Initially, it was 12 months, 18 months, then in some cases up to 24 months. And a lot of things were feeding into that. One of those being the sales and demand rates. Another thing being just the ability to deliver, being that whilst we saw on the home side, homes took a lot longer to build, the estates did as well. It took a lot longer to get all the necessary materials and the trades in order to create the land and do that subdivision. And now, that all that work has started to pay off, and we're seeing more of that titled land out there already.
Certainly is, good opportunity for people out there, and a big shift from 2 years ago when I reckon you could have nearly counted on one hand how many title blocks were around Melbourne. So, that certainly provides opportunity for the buyer, which is great, and it makes it more of a buyer's market, doesn't it? Really, so which is great. Yeah, so good times ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Titled land presents a good opportunity for people to get a great deal. When the land titles, developers do become a bit more motivated to come to the negotiation table. So there's an opportunity for people, like I said earlier, to put an offer forward and create their own deal and I guess create their vision. And now is absolutely the time to do it.
Well, Will, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate the insights you've given. It's been, absolute sort of an honour and a pleasure, really. You've got I guess I took a few things away myself, actually. Just good to hear from the land insight component. I think that's really valuable for our listeners as they're sort of starting to or thinking about proceeding, whether they do or they don't. But there's some good opportunities out there at the moment. So thank you to everyone also for listening. As always, if you enjoy what you're listening to, you get some value, please pass it on to another person to listen to the podcast as well, so they can get the same value. Also, we'd love if you really enjoyed it. Pop a 5-star rating there, whatever platform or whatever you're listening on, or if you're watching it through YouTube or you're listening on a podcast platform, please give us a positive review there. That would be very helpful. Any questions, any ideas, anything you want to sort of comment on, any feedback, just jump on our website and hit the contact us button. That's homebuildinghub.com.au. Other than that, thanks again, Will. Thank you again, Darren, and you guys enjoy your weekends, and we will see you all on the next one.
1, 2, 3.